Hello everybody and welcome to another Houdini tutorial. My name is Kate and today we're going to be doing something a little bit more easier. We're going to be simulating a fish, and I know this sounds a little bit easy, but I do find one big part of being a junior artist is wrapping your head around the smallest things, like doing character effects or animal effects. So I thought it might be useful to walk through like a Vellum workflow of how to simulate a rough kind of layout of a fish. So let's get started. So as we can see, we have a fish here, and I'm just going to do a little quick flip book so you can see how he moves. So as we can see, he's swimming back and forth, and we have a slight weird type of bending going on in the back half of the fish, but we'll cover that later. Depending on what type of fish you're simming, you might want to have more flexibility in the fins or more stiffness, depending on which type of fish you're simming. So it's really up to you, but this is just a general setup of how to set something up like this. So I hope you understand, and let's get started. So diving right in, you can kind of see that I have a little rough geometry of a fish here. I got it from free3d.com, and they have some great geometry there, but as you can see here, this is the best one I could find for free, so I did have to modify the geometric structure a bit, because if we stuck this into Vellum right now, it probably wouldn't work. So I'll walk you through what I did. So jumping into build 1, you can see this big giant node tree, and up here I did something really fun. So you can already see that I've already started to modify my fish geometry. So going up here, we have the original fish. And what I'm doing is I'm creating a wire attribute called wire capet, and I am subdividing him, and I'm transforming him. Actually, I don't need this, so I'll just get rid of him. Over here, I have a time shift, which is keeping the fish on frame 1, and it's just kind of telling point to form. This is the frozen version of the fish. Up here I have a line, and I've also placed the line, I'm going to turn this off, starting at 0, 0. And its length is 2.35, points are 6. And if you turn on your points visualizer here, you can see the points. Then transform this back to 0, 0. So the middle of the line is going through here. So if you look at this, you'll notice that it's kind of matching up with the fish body. If that makes any sense whatsoever. I've then resampled this line so it has more points. And then I've added a ripple solver. And the cool thing about the ripple solver is that pretty much, because it's deforming point positions, it works really well with lines. So it's got this really kind of flappy movement going. I then smooth it just a little bit so we kind of have a smoother line. Maybe we need it, maybe we don't. Yeah, I don't think we need it. We'll get rid of it. And I've made a little file cache so I can cache out my line. So the ripple has a wave height, decay, and a wave speed, all edited, as well as the wavelength as well. So these can be pretty much up to you. For me, when I wanted the fish to like kind of vibrate back and forth, I wanted it going at this speed, but you can choose anything you like. So I'm just going to quickly recache this, and I'm going to convert this line and make sure it's a polygon. Adding another wire attribute, and I've also added a null just to confirm that I want this to go out. Then I have point deformed this, and you can kind of see the fish shrink a little bit. I'm not too keen on that, but it works for this setup. So you can kind of see the fish vibrating back and forth, almost like it's not staying in place, which is exactly what we want, because if you look at fish in the ocean, they're never still. They're always moving, because if they stop moving, they die. So we always want a constant kind of motion in our fish. I then subdivided him a little bit more, and you can kind of see him getting a lot cleaner and a lot smoother. And then I've cached him out, and I've deleted any attributes I don't need. The next thing I've done is I've added a little bend modifier. And what this bend modifier is doing is once again adding more movement to this fish. So it's taking the top half of the fish and just bending it back and forth. So you can kind of see him going like that. If we go to the keyframes, it starts at -60, goes to 50.3, 48.5, 79.4, 55.6, and -54.7. And you could probably make these keyframes a little bit more symmetrical and more constant in value, but these were the ones that work for me. Over here, I've started to make some different groups so I can control more specific movement in my fish. So I wanted to group the tail because I want the tail to move differently from the rest of the body. Because if you look at a fish, the tail moves a little bit faster depending on how well it's moving. Hi, sorry about that. I had to fix my tail group. So I have to reselect some points right here, just so the tail will move a little bit better. So going back down to our bend, you can see that the tail is kind of flapping back and forth. And it's very basic and it's very staggered and kind of stiff. But we'll fix that later on. If we go to our bend, we see some more keyframes. So it starts at these numbers right here, goes to frame 16, changes, frame 36, frame 48, frame 60, and frame 76. Then I have a subdivide again on my fish. And what the subdivide is doing is just refining our fish a little bit more and making them a little bit smoother, just so Vellum can work with them better. So over here we have a smooth, which probably isn't doing that anything, so I'm going to get rid of it. And what this group over here is doing is selecting the eyes. I wanted to modify our fishy just a little bit more because again, I didn't like the model. I think we could have some more detail in the eyes, so I wanted to extrude it just a little bit. So once again, I subdivided. I've taken this group name eyes, which is a primitive group, gone to my subdivide, and ran over the group eyes. So it's only subdivided the areas here on the eyes, which is pretty great. Then we've added a poly extrude, which is only running over the group eyes, and is extruding the distance outwards. So depending on how wide you want your fish eyes and how deep you want them inset, you can have some very interesting results. Woo! So over here, I wanted to clean everything up before it goes into Vellum, and I've deleted all my groups. Then down here, I have another group that is selecting the inside of the eyes, just to once again extrude that outwards. So we have that called group 5. And then here we have our poly extrude, which again is giving more more detail to our eyes and more bug-eyed to our fish. And we have the inset distance and a distance set over here. And then I've once again smoothed everything so we can have a smoother kind of eye connected to the body. I'm going to turn off my point visualizer. And I once again deleted my groups. Attribute delete, I've deleted everything I need. I don't really need UVs right now, so I've deleted them. If you were going into a production, you could probably delete this. You know what, hell would delete it anyways, because I think you always need... I understand why I did this. Okay, so I deleted UVs here because the original UVs on the fish were kind of warped at this stage, but from all the edits I was doing. So I need to create some more new UVs, which I did down here. And sometimes when you're using a model off the internet, you might have to change the UVs yourself, which is completely normal, so don't be surprised if you have to do that. So we have our fish edits out, and then we have our fish over here. So I'm just going to recache everything because I have edited my tree, and we'll let Houdini cook that out. So now we have our little null. I've once again added a null here that's just out fish build, just so I know where the cache is. And now, well, this is where it gets kind of fun because you need to pump everything into Vellum and you need it to work. So you need to be very careful of how you set your groups. So I've set a group and I've manually selected where I want to control the back fins. So I've gone through here and I've kind of used a lasso selection on my tool, and I've selected the fins, kind of like that. This is going to be one individual sim group. I'm not going to sim all the fins at once or the mouth, because if you do that, Houdini will kind of explode. So don't even try to do that. I've set this group to back fins, and then over here I have another group called mouth. And if we select mouth, you can see I've again lassoed the selection near the mouth. Then I've done one for the tail. So if you select that, you can see the tail. And you can see that the tail goes into the body of the fish. And the reason I wanted that is that I wanted the tail, when you sim it, to attach to the kind of the stiff body of the fish itself. Because if you grab, let's say right here with the tail, you can run into some issues where when you merge everything back together after Vellum, you'll see holes in your character, and you don't want that. So this was just the easiest way to just have some overlap between the body and the tail itself. And then we have the little fins at the bottom, which you can see down here, and they're kind of selected like that on either side. And over here we have the body group, and this is kind of key to everything because it's grabbing all the points that I want to be sturdy and I don't want to move. So all the fins are going to be like pinned to these points on the character. And depending on how you want your tail and your fins to move, you can have this body selection go into your fins or fill in this gap that I have over here for the back, tail, or the mouth as well. And it's really important to have like a pin group, because as soon as you start simming these back fins or the tail and you don't have it pinned to something, it's just going to fly away in your scene. So just be aware of that. It can cause some issues. So here we are at the meat of the simulation, which is the vellum. And you can see that I've separated everything in elements. If we dive down here quickly, we have a mouth, side fins, bottom fins, back fins, and a tail. So let's kind of dive into this. There's another one over here, which is rest of body, which is just taking this group right here and exporting it outwards. So it's taking just this group, and there's a delete that's taking the body group and deleting everything but the body. So that's probably the easiest bit of the simulation. And using that concept, we'll start explaining for the tail. So if you go over here for the tail, we once have a delete, which is taking our tail group and once again pinning it to the body like that. So we have our cloth, and you won't see any changes here, but you'll also want to edit your edge length scale based on how big your model is. So here I have mine set at 0.33. I'm scrolling down, I have my stiffness at 34. Stiffness down here is at 56. And then if we go down here to the pin constraints, you can see that all of it is pinned down. And the reason it's all pinned down is because it is overlapping with our little thing over here. So if we go into our Vellum solver, for this one I had to make the contents editable because I ran into a few issues where with how the tail was moving, it was creating a lot of bendiness I didn't really like. So I had to dive inside and fix it. So I'm going to go down to frame 1, and we're going to take a look at the Vellum solver. So you can already see that I've edited my time scale, my sub steps, constraint iterations, and smoothing iterations. For characters like this, where they're just small little fishies, I always recommend putting up the constraint iterations to 200, especially if it's attached to something like a Vellum pin. It gives you a better control when it comes to constraints. And if you're dealing with cloth, I think the default sub-step range is about 3 to 4, so you will want to adjust that accordingly. And because we have an overlap with our body over here, in kind of inside our tail, I did also want to add some collision passes just so there wasn't any errors whatsoever as well. So let's dive inside. And if this is your first time taking a look at the inside of a Vellum solver, you might start to panic because you'll look at this and you'll go, oh my gosh, what am I doing? And absolutely, it's hectic. I don't know why the layout's like this, but it is. But don't be scared, you can do this. So if you dive inside, the first thing you'll want to take a look at is the DOP-net. And the DOP-net is very interesting because you can see where the parameters have been promoted to the surface. In this particular case, if you click on them like here, you can see which ones they're connected to. And then you'll notice things that aren't connected or referenced on the surface of this node. And one of them being the scale time. And that's one of the things that I've edited. Diving inside, that's gonna say an error because I'm not sure if it's colliding with anything, but we'll see. Going on to the Vellum solver, I've changed the default mass and the default thickness, so they're a little bit higher than they naturally would be, and those are the two things that I've edited inside the DOP-net, inside the Vellum solver. So now we can dive back up to the surface. Going to the Vellum IO, I've saved this to disk, and that's pretty much all I've done here. And then I've added a normal to make sure all the polygons are facing outwards, and another node that says out tail. So over for the back fins, once again we're going to have a similar concept going on. So for the back fins, I've deleted everything but the back fins. I've added a null, which is fine. I had some stuff previously before this null, but I'm just going to keep it there for now. And we've deleted everything but the mouth, back fins, tail, and little fins as a colliding objects. Because we don't want the back fins to collide or go inside the body of this fish. And because they're big enough, or depending on how much you like the fins to bend, they can possibly bend back inside the fish, and you don't want that. So we once again have our vellum cloth, which you can kind of see all the constraints going on over there. We got the stiffness changed, and going up here we've once again changed the edge length scale to 0.33, and we're telling it to run over these point groups over here. I don't think we need it to run over the tail, so I'll just take that out. And that's pretty much it for that cloth node. And looking at the pins, you can see them pinned together. And where these pins are is where the body overlaps on the fish. So to keep these pinned down, you do need that body to overlap. And if it doesn't overlap, not only will you see gaps, or the cloth might float away. You might have a flapping kind of loose polygon going on, so always be careful. And then we have our Vellum solver. Now for this one, I didn't have to go inside the Vellum solver. I just had to add stuff on the surface. So I've added some default forces, which are wind. I've taken away the gravity. I've upped the velocity dampening. And if we go to the solver, I once again have 4 substeps, 200 constraint iterations, and 14 smoothing iterations, and 23 collision passes. The next one is the bottom fins. So let's jump over there. So the bottom fins, already you're going to see it's these fins. And I ran into an issue when I was simming them because these are higher up than these ones. They're going to move differently. And I saw some little sporadic polygons twisting outwards that shouldn't have been there. So I had to blast away these top fins. So once again, it's a similar setup. Going to our cloth, vellum cloth, and going upwards. And these didn't really need anything to change. They're all on the default setting. This is once again pinned to our body of our fish, and you can see the constraints there holding everything in place. And our vellum bot, and I think I called this bot as it's the bottom of the fish. But usually this is just called vellum solver. These have 5 sub-steps to them, and the constraint iterations are 200, smoothing iterations are 23, and collision passes are 23 as well. Wind is 1.3, and that's pretty much all the settings on there. Once again, cached everything out. And I had to add a Vellum post-processing for this. In a second, I'll show you what happens. So we can kind of see the flapping going on for the bottom fins. But I also want to be careful. You can kind of see the edges right there change after the Vellum post-processing. So it's just giving it some extra detanglement and subdivision where I needed it. And not all your fins will need this on a fish, but sometimes you will need it. And that's pretty much it for that. Going up here to our other fins, similar concept yet again. We have our vellum cloth. Everything's the same there. It is pinned to the body of our fish. And on our vellum solver, we have 5 sub-steps, 23 smoothing iterations, and 23 collision passes. And our forces are 1.3 on the x-axis. These are once again cached out, and they are post-processed by the Vellum post-process node. And lastly, we have the mouth. And a mouth on a fish actually kind of always moves. Let's say if you're looking at a sunfish that you might see here in northern Canada, the mouth always kind of moves a little bit. So this is more of a sunfish than an actual deep sea fish, but I've selected where I would like the fish mouth to move. For my vellum cloth, I have stiffness 8, damping ratio 0.2, stiffness drop off 11. And going up, stiffness up 3. And everything's normal up there. Vellum pin, once again pinning the fish. Vellum bots. We have the wind. It is pushing the fish mouth down and getting it to move back and forth. Added some velocity dampening, wind drag. Solver's got 5 sub-steps, and it's just a copy and paste type from the solver over here. Cached it out, and post-processed this, just because I found when it moved, it kind of popped a little bit, and this fixed some of the issues. So down here, I've merged everything together, and suddenly you can see there's no overlap. We've got a very happy fish. All his pieces are together how they should be. And then I've deleted all my attributes that I don't need. Even though when you add a vellum cache and a vellum post-process, they do automatically delete all your vellum attributes for you after you finish simming, sometimes you can still get some leftover ones. So I always put down a vellum or an attribute delete when I am creating anything with vellum. I've also added a group delete and deleted any extra groups that I'm not aware of that are still on my fishy. And I'm going to delete this because I know I don't need it. And we've got an out fish. And that's pretty much it. We've got a very happy fish. If we sim through, he moves back and forth. And that's pretty much how you sim a fish. And I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. My name is Kate, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!